My girlfriend's refusal to change her unmotivated lifestyle left me supporting us both. And when I tried to end it, I had to take drastic steps to break free. About 2 years ago, my girlfriend decided to drop out of college, and since then, she's turned into someone I can barely recognize, a person who's totally lost her drive and ambition. I know that sounds harsh, but I'm working 50, 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat because she claims she's too pretty to work. Just today, I got home around 6 p.m. after a long day, only to find her still in bed, surrounded by leftover takeout boxes. She hadn't showered, brushed her teeth, or done anything other than get up to grab the food delivery from the door. After the tough day I'd had at work, coming home to that sight was the last straw. I snapped and told her she couldn't keep living like this, and her response was to get physically aggressive with me. I wanted to end the relationship right there, but she guilt-tripped me, saying she has no one else to turn to if I leave her. She went back to lying in bed for the rest of the day, but a few hours later, I tried again to tell her that I couldn't keep doing this. I made it clear that for the sake of my own mental health, I needed out. When guilt-tripping me didn't work this time, she got out of bed and ran to the kitchen. She grabbed a pair of scissors and threatened to harm herself if I left. I didn't want to take any chances, so I backed down and agreed to stay with her. Right now, she's sleeping, but I've decided that tomorrow, I'm going to end things for good. If she tries the same stunt again and follows through on her threats, that's on her, not me. I can't continue like this anymore. Update 1. Last night, when we were getting ready for bed, I didn't change into my sleep clothes. Instead, I stood there and told my girlfriend that we needed to have a serious talk. At first, she was goofing around, jumping on the bed with a smile, thinking I wasn't serious. But eventually, she realized I meant it. I explained that something didn't feel right anymore, and that I'd been trying to make this relationship work for years. But I was losing patience waiting for her to get a job, go back to school, or even just find a hobby. I told her it frustrated me that she didn't seem to care about herself or have any drive to do something with her life. To my surprise, this time, she actually listened. She didn't just listen. She agreed with what I was saying, even suggesting job opportunities she could pursue and courses she might be interested in. She even offered to let me supervise while she applied online to prove she was serious. I was in complete disbelief. It seemed like she thought I still wanted to make the relationship work, and for a brief moment I almost believed this might be the turning point for her. But that made the next part even tougher for both of us. I started by telling her that my feelings for her had changed, which eventually led me to admit that I didn't feel anything for the relationship anymore. I was exhausted and ready for a fresh start with someone who had goals and ambition. When she realized where the conversation was heading, she broke down in tears, asking why I hadn't told her sooner. I explained that I'd tried to encourage her to take small steps like cooking, going out with me, or going back to school, even offering to pay for her classes. She said she understood that part, but was hurt that I didn't make it clear that my frustration was causing me to lose interest in her. She apologized repeatedly, saying she wasn't in the right mindset and couldn't find anything that motivated her. She confessed that the only thing she looked forward to was spending time with me, and that was why she hadn't put effort into anything else. Her words didn't really move me. I just felt uncomfortable. I tried to suggest that maybe she'd be happier with someone more suited to her lifestyle, but she immediately interrupted me, panicking. She kept apologizing for her behavior and begged for another chance, promising to be a better girlfriend. She said she'd go anywhere with me the next day and would start looking for courses in August, but she couldn't bear to lose me because I was the only thing she had left. There were so many tears that I told her we'd continue the conversation once she calmed down, which we eventually did after about an hour. She pleaded for 2 months to turn things around, promising to apply for jobs and work on being a better partner. Although I had my doubts, I agreed to give her that time since I didn't want her to end up homeless, and it seemed like a reasonable compromise. However, I was firm about wanting to see other people, but she was more focused on fixing the relationship and insisted that she could make me love her again. She kept asking me what she could do to make things right, saying that losing me would be the worst thing ever since I was all she had. When it looked like she was on the verge of another breakdown, I reluctantly agreed to see how things went for the next month. In my mind, I figured if I gave her 2 months to get her life back together, she'd be ready to move on by the end of the first month. I decided to sleep on the couch, and I think I'll keep doing that for a while. She came out around 3 a.m., wanting to talk some more, but I told her I was too tired and that we'd discuss it tomorrow. She ended up lying on the floor beside me for the rest of the night, quietly apologizing again. When I asked her to stop, she just said, "Okay," and sobbed softly under her blanket, but that's how things have been so far. This was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I feel relieved to have finally said what I needed to. I don't know how things will play out in the next 2 months, but I made it clear that the deadline was firm. Update 2. Last night, my girlfriend mentioned a trend she saw on TikTok where couples set a timer on a phone to air their grievances, but I told her that idea was silly. I said if we were going to discuss our issues, it should be without any time constraints. She eventually agreed and asked me to go first, wanting to know when I realized I had fallen out of love with her. I explained that it wasn't a single moment that caused me to lose feelings, but rather a growing frustration that built up over time. Then she asked about the time I felt most angry with her. I needed a few moments to think, and when I finally answered, I told her about the early days when I first started my job at the hospital. I explained how overwhelming that first year was for me, the intense workload, constantly learning new things, and trying to keep up as a professional. It was the most stressed I'd ever been, but that year also taught me the value of hard work and the importance of having passion and drive. I told her that during that time, seeing her at home doing nothing was when I started losing feelings the fastest. I shared how disheartening it was to come home to find her stuck in the same routine. No job, no hobbies, no effort to learn anything new, and no motivation to improve. I pointed out that I'd suggested all sorts of options, from jobs with flexible hours to new courses that might interest her, and yet she never showed any willingness to try. I admitted that it honestly disgusted me. She then asked why I hadn't brought up these issues sooner, and I told her some things shouldn't have to be said out loud. I shouldn't have to remind her to take care of basic tasks like showering or eating, or to encourage her to get off her phone and do something productive. I added that after exhausting days at the hospital, the last thing I wanted was to beg my own girlfriend to make an effort. So I just kept quiet and let the resentment build up. At this point, I admit I got harsher than I intended, but I want to be honest. I told her that when she dropped out of nursing school, I was initially disappointed because I knew she had the potential to succeed. But over time, I realized that with her lack of determination, she probably wouldn't have made it through, which is why I suggested simpler jobs or less demanding majors. Even if she had just cooked or found a small hobby, it would have been enough for me, but she chose to do nothing. She asked if I hated her, and I replied that I wasn't sure. I said I appreciated her kindness and loving nature, but I couldn't stand how she handled her life. I told her I didn't have any ill will toward her after saying all this, but I also didn't feel anything else. I was just done and ready to move on. Throughout the conversation, she held it together, even though I could tell she was struggling. I let her know I was finished talking and offered her the chance to share her thoughts, but she asked if we could pick up the conversation later. She then locked herself in our room for the rest of the day. The following day, we sat down again, and she admitted that she thinks she's depressed, saying she hadn't realized it until now but lacked any motivation to do much of anything. Some people suggested I ask her to get tested for ADHD, but when I brought it up, she was completely against the idea. Despite my efforts to explain that it wasn't like a typical hospital visit and didn't involve needles, she refused to even consider it. She then asked if I'd be willing to give her another chance if she managed to change her ways. I told her I didn't know if it would make a difference since I did not have any feelings for her right now. She pushed for a compromise, and I reiterated that I'd give it a month to see if anything changed. I made it clear that while I'd match the effort she put into improving herself, there was no guarantee that my feelings would return. She wasn't happy with my response, but I stood firm. She handed me a list she'd made the night before of hobbies and interests she wanted to explore, with photography and cooking being the main ones. She also showed me proof on her phone that she'd started applying for entry-level jobs on platforms like Indeed and Glassdoor. I told her that if she genuinely threw herself into these hobbies and showed real passion, I wouldn't care as much about whether she had a job. But if she failed to take any action to better herself, then finding a job would be essential, especially if she needed to move out. Update 3. Last week, my girlfriend was incredibly proactive. It was like she was on a manic high, throwing herself into various hobbies she thought she might enjoy. True to my word, I tried to meet her halfway and supported her as best I could. The only activity that she really seemed to stick with was photography. She had some clothes she'd collected over the years, and she sold a few of them on Depop to buy a Canon 250D camera, which she says is great for beginners. I have a feeling she's sticking with this hobby mainly because it gives her an excuse to spend more time with me. She kept asking me to join her on outings around the city to test out her new camera. Since I had promised to match her effort and didn't want to back out of that commitment, I went with her even after my long shifts. I noticed a significant change in her behavior during this time. Normally she's affectionate, but this past week, she turned it up to the maximum. She was constantly checking in with me, asking if I was upset or how I was feeling, and seemed hyper-focused on my mood. When we were out together, her displays of affection were over the top. She wanted to hold hands, kiss constantly, and stay out late, even when I reminded her I needed to get up early for work. It's hard to put into words exactly what was going on, but it felt overwhelming. I'm not sure if it was love bombing, but with all the intense energy she was putting into this, I had a feeling a crash was inevitable, and that's exactly what happened during the second week. It became too much for me to handle, especially considering the lingering issues I was still dealing with. I've been confiding in my work friends about everything that's been happening, and they warned me that I was likely being love-bombed, as they had predicted, and that it would only escalate. They asked what my plan was if I couldn't get out of the situation within the 2-month time frame. I told them my lease was ending soon, which gave me some peace of mind because it meant I could easily move out if things didn't improve, while still giving her plenty of notice. My coworkers pointed out that I seemed more exhausted than usual and that it was becoming noticeable, but I insisted that I was fine. Over the weekend, they strongly encouraged me to go out with them, saying it would do wonders for my mood, and that staying cooped up in my apartment wasn't good for my mental health. At first, I turned them down, but when they asked again on the day of, I agreed. Spending time with them ended up being a great decision. It really lifted my spirits. Update 4. I knew the emotional crash was coming, and I was right. It hit hard and was pretty messy. In hindsight, some parts could have been handled better. Writing my last update helped me clear my head, but I admit that my stress levels were so high that I started smoking again. Even though I'm not proud of it, it did help calm my nerves when I felt like I was on the verge of breaking down. There was a moment during one of our outings when my girlfriend seemed to be in a bad mood. Later at home, she accused me of being dismissive and asked if I was angry with her. Trying to be more open about my feelings, I told her that her constant need for reassurance and affection was overwhelming. I also mentioned that since she was still sleeping in the living room, I wasn't getting any alone time, and after so many outings, I was feeling both physically and emotionally drained. Honestly, I was mostly just exhausted, and apparently, it shows on my face more than I realize. Both my girlfriend and my coworkers have pointed it out. She seemed really affected by what I said and didn't speak to me for the rest of the day or the next. But by the second day, her mood had turned much darker. Looking back, I probably should have tried to apologize or talk it out with her, but instead, I used that time to catch up on sleep and enjoy some much-needed alone time, which I hadn't had in over a week. Update 5. As September came to an end, I faced a big decision with my lease set to expire. I ultimately chose not to renew it, realizing that I needed a fresh start, away from her and the memories of our relationship. While I appreciated some of the moments we shared during this challenging time, I knew that staying was no longer an option. On the last Saturday of the month, I told her that I was moving out. I explained my reasons calmly, saying that I needed to focus on myself and my future, and that living together just wasn't working for me anymore. As my words sank in, I saw her face change, and she started to cry. What followed was a heated argument where she accused me of abandoning her, and not caring about everything we'd gone through. She couldn't understand why I was leaving when in her mind, things had been improving. I tried to stay calm, but her words stung. I told her I wasn't abandoning her. I was just trying to take care of myself. As the argument escalated, her distress turned into something more frightening. In a sudden fit of rage, she lashed out and struck me across the face. The hit caught me completely off guard, and I stumbled back, shocked. She froze immediately, her expression shifting from anger to panic, and started apologizing. But I felt nothing but betrayal. I left the room to gather my thoughts, my heart pounding with adrenaline. Unsure of what to do, I decided to leave the apartment for a while to clear my head. I ended up driving aimlessly until I reached a hospital after calling a friend who insisted I get checked out. Sitting in the waiting room, I felt a mix of shame and confusion. I didn't want to blow things out of proportion, but I knew I needed to make sure I was okay. The doctor confirmed that I was physically fine, but suggested I take some time to think about the emotional toll of what happened. I stayed there for a few hours, lost in my thoughts, reflecting on everything that had led up to this point. By the time I left, I felt a strange clarity about my situation. I knew I needed to reach out to her one last time. I sent her a message saying I wouldn't press charges, as I didn't want to escalate things any further. I made it clear that I never wanted to see or hear from her again. I urged her to use this chance to sort out her life and move forward. As I hit send, I felt an unexpected sense of peace, like a weight had finally lifted. The next day, I packed my things and moved out, leaving behind all the memories, the arguments, and whatever love had once been there. It was time for me to start a new chapter, away from everything that had been holding me back. I didn't look back as I closed that door for the last time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed our stories and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you captivating tales and new content every week. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate every one of you for being a part of our storytelling journey.